What is going on, YouTube people? Neocards and Comics here today to talk the latter half, a little comics. You can see we have an Avengers 4 up on the screen here. Today we're going to revisit something I did, about 3 weeks ago now, I think. I don't remember the exact, 3-4 weeks ago, where we kind of talked about, in that video we looked at 6 books that were kind of resetting back to 2020 prices. And anytime I see something resetting back to 2020, especially a key book, I am intrigued. Now, some of these have fully reset. Most of these have actually gotten almost back to that point, which kind of puts it back into, shout out to Swaggle. He does the comic book indexes for the various ages, and he talks a lot about trend lines and how certain keys are just kind of on a general trend line where they slowly tick up over time. So if you kind of cut out the crazy part of the last 2 years, some of these books would have naturally gone up a little bit. So it's not crazy that they would be selling for slightly higher now than what they sold for back in 2020 before things got a little crazy. But a couple of these are kind of starting to touch up against where that trend line would be. And once again, they then begin to intrigue me. One book, we'll talk about it here in a minute, is actually towards the top of my current list. Anyone that watches the channel knows I'm a big X-Men fan, and it is an X-Men key. And it is one that I am missing, but it is an important one to have. It is not 101. We talked about 101 last time. So let's just go ahead and dive in. Obviously, we have Avengers 4 off the rip here. First Silver Age appearance of Captain America. Absolutely classic Avengers book. Key in any Avengers run. Classic cover. Whole 9 yards. Checks all the boxes. Let's go over and flip over to the old GPA. Looking at a 4 or 5 here. And once again, when I look at these, I try to pull something that has a decent amount of recent sales. On some of these, like books like this, it's a little tricky. Most recent one here was November 16th. So this one was a couple weeks ago at this point, but still a couple different transactions. That's what we want to see. Back in 2020, this book averaged $1,200, a little under $1,200. That was for the entire year of 2020. At its peak, this thing averaged almost $2,600. It's currently averaging about $1,600, but really it's kind of closer to $1,500. You can see we have in September, a little under $1,600, $1,700, $1,500, a little over $1,500. Absolutely iconic book. One that is definitely on my radar. It's not one that I am actively pursuing. It would have to be a killer deal. That's nothing against the book. That's just more me prioritizing X-Men stuff over Avengers stuff, but one that you might want to put on your radar. A very important Avengers book in that run that a ton of collectors would like to get their hands on. So intriguing to see this one. You can see on the chart side of things, the big hump, and then not right back down again, a little slower trend back down again, but definitely trending on the way back down. You can also see, it's a little tough to see on these GPA graphs, the slight trend up over time. You go back to, let's look here at 2016. This was going for $700. 2019 going for a little over $1,200. And then you get into 2020 going for about $1,400. So once again, fast forward to now, almost 2023, it's sitting around $1,500 feels pretty okay, as opposed to when it was up here at $2,500, $2,600. This is kind of what we want to see. Does it kind of line up where the book has slowly been trending along that line? Are we starting to touch that trend line and maybe even dip below it in some cases? Next up, this is the one that I hinted at earlier. X-Men 94. Do not own one of these. I do have a giant size X-Men one, but I do not own an X-Men 94. Once again, classic key book in the X-Men run. Kind of a must-have if you're a big X-Men collector. You kind of got to have one of these. It's the second appearance of pretty much all the key X-Men. Spoilers. Death of Thunderbird. I know. Pour one out. Poor Thunderbird. A lot of people collect this run from 94 up through the entire Claremont run. People cut off at different points. But 94 / Giant Size X-Men 1 is where a lot of people will start picking up X-Men and run with it from there for a while. And like I said, this is one that I am actually I have a save search on eBay. Every time one goes up on Grails or Elite or any of the other big comic book sellers, I am clicking on it to look at it immediately. I'm kind of still remaining a little bit patient with it, but let's go ahead and dive into the numbers real quick here. Now, the 2020, we're looking at an 8.0, by the way. Once again, I kind of use this because it actually had some recent December transactions. 2020, it averaged about 640. It got up to 1900 as a high, currently at 1200. So still a ways to go to get back to that 2020 average number, but in some of these, I don't know if that's 100% realistic. I like looking at the later 2020 numbers. So, September, this was going for around 700 on an average price, 900 in December before it did, silly season where we have this here. Right now, an 8.0 is sitting at about $1,000. You can see we have a 1080, an 1190, and a 1050 all since October. There's a 1300 in there and a 1350 early October. But generally speaking, a little over $1,000, and it's kind of been sitting at around that point for quite a while. This one could still have a little bit lower to go, but I think it's, I wouldn't feel bad if I got a good deal on one of these at around, I don't know, let's say like 900 cash or something. I'd actually like this in a little bit slightly higher grade, maybe like an 8.5, maybe even a 9.0, depending on the price point. But classic book, like I said, must have in any X-Men collection. Always one that people are looking for. Not difficult to find. None of these are super difficult to find. Avengers 4 can be a little tricky to find, but an X-Men 94, you can walk into any big comic show and there'll be plenty of them laying around. Next up, Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1. This is the first appearance of the Sinister Six. This book got a huge run up with the last Spider-Man movie with the Sinister Six, kind of appearing in it. Very tough book and a decent grade because it's from 1964 and it was also an annual, so very thick, not, easy to kind of keep in one piece in a decent condition. But this is just a classic, oh my goodness, spike up, plateau, and come right back down again. We're looking at a 3.5 here. 2020 average price was $700. 2021, $2,000. And now we are back down to $1,000. Last sale in November was $1,000, but you even see a couple previous to that, $780, $883. Now, I always give, in this grade range, you got to give it a little leeway. I've seen some 3.5s that look fantastic. My Avengers 8, first appearance of Kang, is a 3.5. It presents great, in my opinion. I've seen other 3.5s that present like crap. So, without knowing exactly what these books look like, I'm going to give that a little bit of leeway, especially on this one, since it's an annual, like I said before, thicker book. They could get pretty beat up pretty easily. But 3.5, you have a lot of variance in the eye appeal. So, but the fact that this got down to, the under $900 when it averaged 700, it's a tough condition book. It's still the first appearance of the Sinister Six. It's not the first appearance of any of the individual characters. But to me, it's a very important Spider-Man key. Not one that's necessarily on my radar. I'm not like super huge Spider-Man guy. I have a lot of X-Men stuff I need to cross off the list. I do have a decent amount of Spider-Man stuff, but definitely one, if you're a Spider-Man collector and you kind of missed out on this one, maybe not necessarily a bad time to circle back to it. As once again, first appearance of the Sinister Six. Cool cover. Having them all on there, kind of fighting Spider-Man. A little weird artwork there on Kraven and Doc Ock, but cool Spider-Man pose. I like the Mysterio hiding over there in the corner. Absolutely iconic book that has kind of come back to earth. Let's look at something a little bit more modern. One that's on my radar that I would pick up if it just kind of came around at the right price. Once again, not something hard to find. Uncanny X-Men 221. This is the first appearance of Mr. Sinister. This book gets a little bit of a knock because the cover doesn't have him on it. I kind of get that. Back in 2020, this book was averaging $260 in a CGC 9.8. Got all the way up to 500. Currently sitting at 350, 360. And you can see some sales have even dipped below that number in some cases. We have a 320, a 330, a 325, a 330, a 340. This is one of, I was like paying cash at a show. I'd want to be like around $300 on, if possible. I do think Mr. Sinister as an X-Men villain, at some point in time, Marvel's going to get there. X-Men are definitely the late phase stage, or the next big phase that a lot of people are looking forward to beyond the Fantastic Four. If you're going to do a deep dive into the X-Men from a content, property, whatever, Mr. Sinister is going to come into play at some point in time. He is one of the key X-Men villains. Obviously, Magneto is like tier 1. I would put Sentinels up there as like a tier 2, and then it would probably go into Apocalypse and Sinister as, you know, right up there with important X-Men villains that have to come into play. And he, at some point in time, I have to imagine, will come into play. He's already kind of been hinted at in some of the Fox stuff on the super fringes, Easter egg territory stuff. So I would not be surprised to see Sinister play a major role or some sort of role in the X-Men in the near future. I know the cover, I always like the cover. It's a cool cover. It just doesn't have Sinister on the cover, which kind of takes away from it a little bit. But this is one that I would definitely wouldn't mind owning at some point in time. It's just one of those ones that it's not a high priority item for me because, once again, it's kind of readily available. It's not the rarest thing in the world. And it's reasonably priced, so I could be a little bit patient on it. But if it's one that you've been looking for, might not be a bad time to jump in. Last but not least, and this one, I don't know if it's just a rogue one-off sale or whatever. This one was kind of borderline. I do own this book. Edge of the Spider-Verse #2, first appearance of SpiderGwen, major player in Into the Spider-Verse, extremely popular character, one of my favorite Marvel characters. I have a lot of SpiderGwen / Ghost Spider, whatever you want to call her, cards, PMGs, etc. I have this in a CGC 9.8 I picked up in very, very early 2021. So this in 2020 averaged $700. This book pushed $1,1700. The last sale is $950. Now, previous ones to that were $1,200, $1,200, $1,075, $1,000, $1,100, $1,100. You can see a lot of 1100s in here. In this November through the end of November range, in this kind of rogue $950. Not a super rare book. You could find this one fairly regularly. It's not as common as Ultimate Fallout 4. I believe there's a little bit less of them on the census than that, but regardless, it's not tricky to find this if you really want one. I think she's going to have a major role. We're about to get into the Spider-Verse 2 trailer pretty quickly here. And we don't 100% know what's going on with the Fox plans and Spider-Man in the MCU from that standpoint and the Fox verse of Spider characters. To me, it is just a matter of time until we get a Miles live action. And if you're going to get Miles live action, you are going to get Gwen live action, or Ghost Spider, SpiderGwen, once again, whatever moniker you want to put on her. She's an extremely popular character across the board, big collector base. If this thing continues if this ends up being holds firm, which I don't know if it will or not, but this thing at around $1,000 to me is a pretty good get when you're talking about the 2020 average being at around 700, and kind of a lot of stuff has happened to level this book up since then. I would definitely be intrigued. I am 1,000% biased, as I really like the character. And once again, full disclosure, I do own a copy of this book in a 9.8. I believe, I would need to double check my records. I think I paid around $1,100 for mine. So about right at what it is sitting at today, outside that $950 sale. So I don't know if this is the new trend or someone got a steal at $950. But just kind of keep that in the back of your head. I am a big believer in Edge of Spider-Verse overall. It's one of the few modern books that I actually purchased when I kind of dove back in again at the tail end of 2020, beginning of 2021, before everything really kind of went crazy at like that March, April area of 2021. So that's the list. Hope it was helpful. Let me know which one you're intrigued by on this list, and we will catch you guys and girls on the next one. Peace.